My name's Mara Ellison. I'm 34, single, no kids. And I live alone in a small apartment in Albany, New York, where I work as a grant coordinator for a nonprofit that helps other people's families stay afloat. I come from a working class family in Kinderhook, a quiet town with loud silences. But somehow I ended up being the one with the stable job, the clean credit, the car that always starts. My brother Tyler, he's the one everyone waits for at dinner, even when he's 2 hours late and half drunk. I've spent most of my life paying bills that weren't mine, being praised for my dependability, while quietly footing the cost of everyone else's chaos. I used to think that made me loyal. Now I'm not so sure. This Christmas, my family finally said out loud what they'd only ever implied, and when they slammed the door shut, I opened another one. And what I did next. That's the part no one saw coming. The porch light flickered like it always had. One of those old yellow bulbs that buzz slightly in the cold, and for some reason, that's what I focused on while I waited on the steps. My hands were full, balancing gift bags, and a tray of sugar cookies wrapped in foil. I'd baked them that morning the way our grandmother used to even use the same chipped snowflake cookie cutters. I stood there breathing in the cold, watching the frost crawl along the edge of the storm door, telling myself this year would be different. Then Tyler opened the door. He didn't say hello, didn't even step aside, just stood there blocking the entrance with that smirk he'd been wearing since we were teenagers. Equal parts charm and condescension. This isn't a place for losers, he said, like he was doing me a favor by saying it out loud. Behind him, I could see the living room. The tree glowed with white lights. My nieces and nephew were chasing each other in socks. My mother was curled up on the couch with a glass of red wine, her eyes fixed on the TV like none of this concerned her. My dad sat stiff in the armchair, not even turning his head. The room looked warm golden even, like a postcard. My hands stayed frozen around the gift bags. Are you serious? Tyler shrugged. I don't make the rules. He did, though. He always had. You've got to be kidding me, I said quieter this time. No drama, Mara, he said, rolling his eyes at the rhyme he thought was clever. Just go. I glanced past him again. Mom didn't look over. Dad scratched his neck and stared at his feet. Sophie wasn't in sight. I wondered if she even knew what was happening. The foil on the cookies had come loose. I reached up, smoothed it with my thumb, and then met Tyler's eyes. You're right, I said, steady as I could manage. And then I turned around. I carried the bags back down the steps, past the frosted hedges, through the icy patch in the driveway that never got salted. I didn't drop anything, didn't trip, didn't rush. Inside the car, the silence was so loud, I had to sit with it for a second. My fingers stung from the cold. The bags sat in the passenger seat like quiet reminders of how much effort I'd put in. The bows were still perfect. The tags had their names printed in gold ink. I didn't cry. I drove back to Albany with the heat turned up high and my coat still on. I kept expecting something to catch in my throat, a sob, a scream, something, but all I felt was stillness. Like I'd stepped outside a room I didn't realize was suffocating me. At every stoplight, I looked over at the gifts, at the reindeer paper and sparkly ribbon, the tray of cookies shifting gently with each turn. It was absurd how much thought I'd put into making things nice. Back in my apartment, I carried everything in but didn't unwrap a thing. I set the cookies on the counter, turned off the overhead light, and just stood there. The only sound was the hum of the fridge. I poured a glass of wine and sat at the edge of the couch without taking off my boots. Outside the window, snow was starting to fall soft and slow, like it hadn't gotten the memo that the holiday was canceled. It should have hurt more. That's what caught me off guard. I should have been angry, shattered. But I wasn't. I was calm. And in that calm, I realized something I'd never let myself think too clearly before. If I was the loser, I was the one who'd been losing for years. And not just money, time, energy, sleep. My entire sense of worth had been wrapped around keeping everyone else afloat. And the second I stopped being useful, they let me freeze outside the door like I'd never mattered at all. I looked around the apartment. No kids' toys, no crumbs on the rug, no chaos, just stillness. I sipped the wine and reached for my laptop. The glow of the screen lit up my face as I opened my bank account. I clicked through tabs, tuition payments, utility transfers. A recurring grocery allowance for Tyler and Sophie's household. I stared at it all like I was seeing it for the first time. And then I started canceling. One by one, I hit the buttons. End transfer, stop payment, remove autopay. I didn't feel guilty, not even a little. Let them feel the silence they've always expected me to fill. Let them feel the silence they've always expected me to fill. The next morning, the apartment felt like someone had turned the volume down on the world. Even the coffee pot clicked softer. I stood barefoot in the kitchen staring out at the street. A layer of fresh snow blanketed the cars. No footsteps, no tire marks. It looked untouched. That's how I felt in a strange way, like I'd finally stopped letting people walk all over me. I drank my coffee slowly, scrolling through emails I didn't care about. Work could wait. Nothing urgent, just end-of-year donation receipts and 2 reminders about our January board meeting. I opened my bank app again, not out of anxiety, but curiosity. There were no new texts from Tyler, no missed calls. Maybe they finally got the message. Half an hour later, the silence broke. My phone buzzed once. Tyler, you could have at least dropped off the presents. Kids are waiting. I stared at it. No greeting, no apology, just a demand. I typed a one-word reply. No. His response came so fast it nearly overlapped the first. What's your problem? My thumb hovered over the keyboard. I had so much I could say. About Christmas mornings he forgot. About all the birthdays I paid for the emergencies that always came right before rent was due. The guilt that was always implied, but never spoken. But I didn't type any of that. I locked my phone and slid it across the table. Let him wonder. At work, the office was mostly empty. People were still out for the holidays, taking long weekends or remote days until New Year's. I liked it that way. I didn't need small talk about resolutions or cookie swaps. Eva was there, though. She always came in like me. She had a small corner office with a peace lily she somehow kept alive through every season. I passed her desk on my way to the copier, and she glanced up. "You okay?" she asked gently. I paused, surprised she noticed. "Yeah, just needed a quiet one this year." Eva didn't press. She just nodded, the kind of nod that said, "I've had those years too." She went back to her screen and I kept walking. I liked that about her. She didn't need a full download of my life to understand something had shifted. By the 3rd day, Tyler's silence cracked. I woke up to 5 missed calls and 3 voicemails. I didn't listen to them. The texts were angrier now. The rent's due. The kids need shoes. I don't know what the hell you're trying to prove. This is selfish, Mara. You've changed. I didn't answer. Instead, I opened a new spreadsheet. It was a habit by now, budgeting tracking. I looked at the column I'd labeled family support. Year after year, it ate up more than I realized. Tuition fees, groceries, summer camp deposits, gas money for their SUV, random $50 Venmo transfers for stuff the kids need. None of it had ever been paid back. I deleted the entire column. There was a strange kind of peace in that, like scrubbing off something sticky that had clung to my skin for too long. I was halfway through reorganizing the spreadsheet when a memory came back so clear it stopped me mid-keystroke. It was the week Tyler got fired from that plumbing job. He called me in the middle of a meeting, said the power was going to be shut off if they didn't pay the bill by 5 p.m. I left work early, drove 40 minutes, and handed him $300 in cash. No one thanked me. Mom just said, "You're a good girl, Mara. You've always been steady." Steady. Like a bridge. Like a support beam. Like something that gets walked on and never breaks, but also never moves. That memory made me close the laptop and pour myself another cup of coffee. Strong this time. No cream. I leaned against the window and watched a neighbor scrape ice off his windshield. His kids were bundled up in 2 big coats, kicking at piles of snow while he hollered for them to stop. They didn't, and I thought I have no idea what it feels like to be taken care of. A new text buzzed in, this time from Sophie. "I don't know what's going on between you and Tyler, but the kids were really disappointed. We didn't expect this from you." Something in me tightened. Sophie had always been quiet, tired-looking, harried. She barely made eye contact when I dropped off gift cards or boxes of diapers, but she'd never spoken to me like this before. I didn't answer her either. Later that night, I opened the closet where I'd stashed the gifts. I ran my hand over the boxes, the tissue paper still neatly tucked in. I closed the door. I wasn't ready to throw them away, but I didn't want to see them anymore. I was done buying my way into belonging. And maybe, just maybe, they'd start to understand what it felt like when the only steady thing in their lives decided not to show up. She's not just starting to understand, she's about to see everything. I didn't plan to avoid them. At first, it was just easier not to pick up. Then it became a choice, a boundary. Every time I let a call go to voicemail or swiped away another text, it felt like reclaiming a little piece of myself. On Friday morning, the front desk buzzed. Mara. There's a man here asking for you. Says it's urgent. My stomach sank. I already knew. I stepped into the hallway just in time to see Tyler push through the glass doors. His winter coat was half-zipped, cheeks red from the cold, or the anger, I couldn't tell which. He looked like someone used to getting his way, someone still convinced he could talk his way back into control. He spotted me immediately and marched forward. We need to talk, he snapped under his breath. I turned to the receptionist. It's okay, I'll handle it. Tyler followed me into the side stairwell. It was narrow, cold, barely used. Perfect for things people didn't want others to hear. You think you can just cut us off like that, he hissed. The kids are freezing, Sophie's losing it, and you're just playing the martyr? I crossed my arms. I'm not playing anything. I'm just done. You think this makes you the bigger person because it doesn't. It makes you cruel. I stared at him. His eyes were bloodshot. There was a twitch in his jaw I hadn't seen before. You always said you were about family, he went on. Well, family doesn't just walk away. I didn't walk away, I said quietly. I stopped paying to stay. His face twisted. You can't do this. I already did. I stepped around him and opened the stairwell door. The hallway buzzed with fluorescent lights and the distant sound of someone typing. I didn't look back. That night I found a voicemail from Sophie. Her voice was tight, but not angry, just frayed. I know something's going on. I saw your name on the bank statements. He said it was for the kids, but I don't know anymore. Can we talk? I listened to the message twice. Then I sat there on the couch with my phone in my hand for a long time, the apartment lit only by the lamp near the window. The gifts were still in the closet. The spreadsheet still open on my laptop. I called her back the next morning. She answered on the first ring. Mara, yeah. Thanks for calling, she said. Her voice was small, like someone trying not to cry in public. Do you want to meet somewhere? There was a pause. Yeah, please. We met at a diner halfway between our places, one of those old spots with chipped formica booths and handwritten specials on curling paper. Sophie looked like she hadn't slept in days. She wore a long coat with one button missing, and her hair was pulled back in a rough bun. I'm sorry, she said before the coffee even arrived. For that text I sent. I shouldn't have blamed you. I was just surviving, I said. I get it. She nodded, eyes wet. I found casino charges, hotel stays. He told me it was all bonuses from work overtime shifts. My stomach turned. There were no shifts. She opened her purse and slid out a folded stack of papers. Bank statements. My name date stamped transfers, then withdrawals at ATMs in Schenectady, Troy, and one inside a casino in Saratoga Springs. All those years, she said. I thought the money was for the kids. You were keeping us afloat. I was trying to help, I said. But I didn't know he was lying to both of us. I talked to a lawyer yesterday, she added. Just to see. My breath caught, but I didn't interrupt. I can't keep pretending, she said. I've been pretending for so long. I remembered the way she looked every time I dropped off diapers or gas cards, her tired smile, how she always stood slightly behind Tyler, never saying much. You don't have to explain anything to me, I said, but I'll help however I can. Sophie looked up at me like she didn't believe it, like she hadn't expected kindness to survive the wreckage. I should have said something, she whispered. That night, when they called you a loser. I shook my head. You were surviving. She blinked back tears. He always said you owed us, that you were lucky to have a family who needed you. I almost laughed. That's the thing about people like Tyler. They call it family when they're taking and betrayal when you stop giving. Her eyes dropped to her coffee. I looked out the window. Snow was falling again, light and steady. The world outside looked cold but honest. Sophie cleared her throat. I think I need to leave. Before I could answer, her phone buzzed. She flipped it over, looked at the screen, and went pale. It's him. What does he want? She didn't answer, just showed me the screen. A text. We need to talk. Now. You don't know what you're doing. I pushed the coffee aside. Let's go, I said. Let's make sure he knows exactly what you're doing. For the first time in years, I wasn't driving away from a fire. I was carrying someone out. The roads were slick with packed snow, but I drove slowly, letting the quiet fill the car. Sophie sat beside me in the passenger seat, hands clenched in her lap, her phone face down. The folder with the bank statements was tucked under her arm, thick and worn, already from being opened and reread too many times. She hadn't said much since we left the diner, and I didn't push. She looked like someone gathering strength in pieces. "He doesn't know I met with a lawyer," she finally said, her voice low. I nodded. "Then he won't see this coming." When we pulled up to their house, the porch light was on. Same yellow bulb as my parents'. I hated how that light made everything look warm when the truth was anything but. Sophie unbuckled slowly. "If this goes bad, just stay close." "Okay, I will," I said. "You're not doing this alone." She nodded, drew a breath so deep I heard it shake, and climbed out. I followed. We didn't knock. Sophie used her key and pushed the door open with more force than necessary. Tyler was in the living room, hunched over his phone, wearing sweatpants and a hoodie. The TV was on something loud and stupid, but he muted it the second he saw us. "What the hell is this?" he said, standing fast. "I need to talk to you," Sophie said. She wasn't yelling. Her voice had that terrifying calm edge to it, the kind people mistake for softness, right until it cuts. "What, you brought your sister now?" he sneered. "What is this, a freaking intervention?" "She's not my sister," Sophie said. "And this isn't about her. It's about what you've done." He laughed short, sharp. "Oh, come on, you're gonna believe whatever sob story she's been feeding you. She's pissed because we didn't let her in for Christmas. She's always been dramatic." I stepped forward. "She saw the statements, Tyler." He looked between us, his expression twisting, recalculating. "You went through my stuff, no," Sophie said, pulling out the folder and holding it like a weapon. "I went through mine. My name's on those accounts too, remember?" His smile faltered. "All those deposits, the ones you said were bonuses from work, they came from Mara, and you spent them at casinos, on hotels, on God knows what else." "Don't act like you're innocent," he snapped. "You spent the money too." "No," she said quietly. "I spent gift cards and grocery money. I bought school shoes and paid field trip fees. You spent rent money at the roulette table." I watched him try to spin, saw the gears turning behind his eyes, but he didn't have control anymore. "Did you tell her I was paying for everything I asked? That she didn't need to know where the money came from?" He didn't answer. Sophie stepped closer, her voice shaking now, but still steady. "You made me feel crazy for years. You told me we were just scraping by. That Mara offered to help. That she didn't mind." "She did offer," Tyler said, raising his voice. "She liked being needed," I said. "I was manipulated. By both of you at first. But only one of you is still lying." Tyler turned red, his fists clenching. "You think this makes you righteous? Coming into my house talking down to me like I'm trash." "You did that all on your own," I said. He stepped toward Sophie. "We can fix this. We don't need her. She didn't move. I'm not fixing anything. I met with a lawyer. I've already started the paperwork." The color drained from his face. "You what? I'm leaving," she said. "You've lied to me, used me, and dragged our kids through a storm they didn't ask for. I'm done." He turned to me, voice rising. "You told her. You ruined this." "I didn't tell her a thing," I said. "She figured it out on her own." That seemed to enrage him more. He lunged forward, but I stepped between them. "Don't," I said flatly. "You so much as raise your hand in this house, and you'll lose more than your wife." He stared at me, breathing hard. For a second I thought he might swing anyway. Then his hands dropped, shaking. "You think you're better than me," he spat. "You think this makes you some kind of hero." I looked at Sophie, then back at him. "No, it makes me free." He laughed, but it cracked in the middle, more of a bark than a sound. "You'll regret this," he said. "Both of you. You'll see what happens when I'm gone." Sophie didn't even blink. "We already have." He stood there for a beat too long, realizing for the first time that neither of us feared him anymore. Then he grabbed his coat, shoved past me, and slammed the door behind him. Sophie stood frozen, breathing shallowly. I touched her arm. "You okay?" She nodded slowly. "I didn't think he'd go. He always thought you wouldn't." We stood in the silence that followed the house, suddenly too still. Outside, snow began to fall again. Soft, slow, clean. Maybe peace doesn't arrive with forgiveness, it arrives when you stop asking for it. Sophie and the kids moved into my apartment the next day. "Just for a while," she said. "Just until things settled." The living room turned into a fort of air mattresses and duffel bags, drawings taped to the wall with masking tape. Little socks piled up in corners I used to keep perfectly clear. It wasn't quiet anymore, but it didn't feel like chaos. It felt like life, messy, real, a little loud. The first night I made spaghetti, Sophie did the dishes, and the kids argued over who got the big blanket on the couch. I let them. It felt good not to fix everything. After they went to bed, Sophie stood at the kitchen counter drying her hands with a dish towel. "You sure it's okay?" she asked. I nodded. "You're not the one who emptied my account at the roulette table." She gave a tired smile. "I should have known." "We all should have," I said. "But when someone keeps telling you the sky is green, eventually you stop arguing." She leaned against the counter, arms crossed. He always made it feel like I owed him something, even when I was the one holding everything together. I understood that feeling too well. I kept telling myself I was lucky to have a partner who needed me, she added. It felt like purpose, and it kept me from asking why I was always so tired. "You were surviving," I said. "That's not nothing." Sophie's eyes welled. "You should hate me." "I don't," I said, meaning it. "But I'm done helping people who pretend I'm invisible." The next morning, Eva brought over muffins and a stack of coloring books. She didn't say much, just handed them to me with a soft smile, like she knew this version of my life didn't need explaining. Her quiet kindness settled into the room like warm air. Later that afternoon, I got a call from Sophie's lawyer. "Mark Dawson," he said, crisp and professional. "I've been retained by Mrs. Ellison. She asked me to reach out to you directly. Is everything okay?" "She's fine, but I think you should see something." I met him the following day in a small office above a hardware store. He slid a folder across the desk, thick, color-coded, too organized for comfort. "These are all transfers from your personal accounts," he said. "Bank records, dates, destinations. Here's where it gets complicated. Some of the accounts your brother used weren't just personal. There's one under a business name LLC, technically inactive. The funds moved through there before being withdrawn in cash. How much I asked already bracing? North of $70,000. Not counting what went into their household directly, rent, groceries, utilities." I stared at the pages. The transactions read like a timeline of betrayal. Camp registrations, late rent, Christmas bonuses I'd never taken for myself. You'll want to shut down anything else he might have access to. Joint authorizations, shared payment methods, anything informal. "I already have," I said, "but thank you." "Just so you're aware," Mark added, Sophie's pursuing separation. "Not just financial. Custody too." "She told me," I said. "I support her." He nodded. "If your brother contacts you again, let us know." I left the office with the folder under my arm, the weight of it both heavy and oddly freeing. I was no longer playing the game. I was just keeping the receipts. That night, while Sophie sat on the floor reading to the boys, I poured a glass of wine and opened the folder again. I flipped through the pages, line after line, of where my kindness had gone to die. And still, no bitterness. Just a strange, low hum of closure. Then my phone rang. Mom lit up the screen. I let it go to voicemail. When I played it back later, her voice was clipped and familiar. "You've made things difficult for your brother. He's not himself. I hope you can live with that." I hit delete before she finished. For the first time in my life, the guilt didn't stick. I had spent years confusing sacrifice with love, letting them drain me dry because I thought that's what good daughters did, what strong women did, what family meant. But love without respect is just control, and family without accountability is just a trap. I slept better that night than I had in months. The next day, I took the boys for a walk while Sophie met with her lawyer again. They wore mismatched hats and stomped through slush puddles like it was the most fun in the world. I bought them cocoa at the corner bakery. The cashier gave me a soft look when she saw the kids. "Yours?" she asked. "No," I said, smiling. "Just lucky to know them." Back at the apartment, Sophie was waiting with tear-streaked cheeks and a look I couldn't place. "What happened?" I asked. "He's unraveling," she said quietly. "He got fired. His friend kicked him out. And now he's blowing up my phone saying I've destroyed him." "He destroyed himself," I said. "You just stopped covering for it." She nodded. "I know." Then she added almost to herself, "I don't think he's ever been alone before." I looked around the room at the coats on hooks, the shoes in the hallway, the drawings taped to the fridge. "You're not," I said. Sophie smiled. This one was real. Outside, the snow had started again, a quiet kind of falling, soft and steady, like the world exhaling. We stood by the window watching it pile up. It didn't feel like an ending, it felt like a housewarming. I wasn't the loser, they just lost the one person who never stopped showing up. February came in slow and gray, like it was still deciding whether winter should stay or go. The snow hadn't let up, but it had softened, less storm, more hush. Our street looked like something out of a postcard, all slush and steam and blinking porch lights. Inside, things were quieter too. Sophie and the boys had moved into a small duplex across town near a park with a frozen pond and a swing set buried under snow. It wasn't fancy, but it was theirs. She sent pictures every few days, Jackson's crayon drawings taped to white walls, Leo grinning from behind a pile of pancakes they'd made too thick. They looked happy in a way I hadn't seen before. Untangled, lighter. She called once a week sometimes just to say thank you. Other times she didn't have to say much at all. The silence between us had changed shape no longer. Awkward or strained but shared. Familiar. Tyler didn't call again. But word traveled fast in small towns, and even in a city like Albany people talk. He'd lost his job, defaulted on rent, crashed at a friend's place, until even that door closed. Apparently he was still blaming everyone but himself. He was angry, broke, and alone. But this time no one was rushing in to rescue him, especially not me. I didn't celebrate. I didn't post online. I didn't gloat. I just let the silence hold. Instead, I spent my Saturdays walking through the city. I passed the bakery my mother used to take us to when we were kids. Back then, we'd sit by the window with hot chocolate and sugar cookies, my brother always getting two, me always getting praise for not asking. I used to avoid that place. The smell of cinnamon and vanilla used to sting, but now it smelled like proof that sweetness can exist without obligation. One afternoon, I dropped off the last box of unopened Christmas gifts at a donation center across town. The woman behind the counter smiled and asked if I needed a receipt. No, I told her. I already kept what mattered. She didn't ask what that was. I appreciated that. Driving home, I passed my parents' street. It looked smaller now. The house, the driveway, even the trees out front seemed like they'd shrunk. The porch light was on. The same one that flickered in my face when I stood there with arms full of presents they'd never let me give. I slowed down just for a second, long enough to see the silhouettes in the window. My mother on the phone pacing. My father slumped in the recliner. I wondered if they still talked about me, if they called me selfish, or heartless, or worse, ungrateful. Maybe they did. Maybe they always would. But they didn't know me anymore. Not really. I wasn't the girl who broke herself into pieces to be called responsible. I wasn't the backup plan. I wasn't the walking bank account in family disguise. I parked outside my apartment, stepped out into the cold, and looked up. Snow was falling again, soft and steady. The sky was low and pale, the air clean and sharp in my lungs. Inside the apartment was still. I poured tea, curled up on the couch, and opened a drawer I hadn't touched in weeks. Inside was a single photo of my family at some long-forgotten barbecue. Tyler with a beer in hand, grinning. Me off to the side, half smiling. Our parents in lawn chairs, laughing at something I didn't hear. I kept the photo not for nostalgia, but as a kind of evidence, a record of how long I'd been trying to belong. Next to it was a handwritten note from Sophie. "We're safe now. You gave us that." I folded the note and tucked it back inside, then shut the drawer. The heater kicked on with a soft rumble. I leaned my head back and closed my eyes. I wasn't waiting for an apology anymore. I didn't need one. Some stories don't end with revenge or a final blow. Some end with the quiet relief of walking away and never looking back. Outside, a car passed. Headlights swept across the window and caught my reflection, steady, calm, unrecognizable from the woman who once begged to be let in. I breathed in the stillness. I didn't feel empty. I felt earned. And when the snow kept falling, I let it.